there, it's Polly here. So, yeah, I'd done some double checks and I found that, like, someone from my old games group from, like, way back, from when I was 12, right through into my 40s, sadly they've passed. And this was an interesting person. Could be a bit of a twant, but, this guy, Malcolm Dunn. So when I was like a 12-year-old kid just learning war games, this guy was like a 30-something long-term gamer in the local Melbourne clubs. But this guy was sort of fascinating. Where other people sort of have an interest in things, this guy would take on practical research. So I've always been an armour obsessive. It's one of the things that I research, one of the things I've always loved. Malcolm did as well, but Malcolm actually went out and did first off panel beating and then advanced metalworking courses, and so he could actually make armor and make it really well, really well. So who's that sort of guy? Another interesting hobby he had was collecting actual tanks, real tanks. He was a inspector for the Board of Gas and Explosives. And I have, I think, told tales of him before. If not, there'll be one coming soon. But, yeah, so essentially, when he was out in the country, because they would have to turn up farmers who've got, like, explosives handling licenses for, like, removing stumps and so on, he would have to every now and then do a spot check and make sure the stuff is stored properly and these sorts of things. But when World War II ended, there was a shortage of tractors here in Australia because the entire automotive industry had been switched over to making heavy military vehicles. So what the army did was they said, all right, well, look, we'll give you tanks. We don't need them. They're excess to requirements. They just gave farmers tanks to, pull plows and run their farms. Now, they did this, but the thing is, a tank chews up an atomic butt ton of fuel. So the moment actual tractors became available, people would just shove the thing in a barn and they'd leave the tank and they'd kind of forget about it, sometimes for generations. So Malcolm would find these things in old barns and, so say, oh yeah, that thing's chewing up space, we don't know what to do about it. Says, I could get a trailer up here and take it off your hands. It's like it's all rusty, but, I can get it out of here at least. Oh, would you? That's great. So, score, he's got a tank. So we would restore these things. You'd turn up to his place and you would actually help restore tanks. He would show you how to strip down the engines and get the rust off them. And eventually, after many years of work, because often there were parts that were gone, so there's this whole kind of horse trading thing he'd have to do to trade for parts. But you turn up and it's like, Malcolm, there's a quad truck chassis from World War II out the front. So, yeah, I found that. I'm trading that to a guy who's got a Model T Ford engine, and I'm trading that off to him for that. So why? Because there's a guy who needs the Model T engine, but he has the turret ring for the Stuart Light tank out the back. Okay, it's horse trading. All right. Yeah, eventually we'll get these things running. In fact, because I went off into the Army Reserve, into the cavalry, and did my A and B vehicle driving course and all this sort of thing, so I could drive track vehicles. So he did have to move them off to a garage at one stage. That was kind of cool because he contacts the local council to say he needs permission to take track vehicles on the roads. You need permission because they chew up the roads. Got that, contacted the police to say there's going to be a slow vehicle convoy going from A to B. We're going to do it sort of in an off-peak time. It was country roads. But, just so they knew, and off they went. So he's got a Morris armoured car, which he's driving up the front. Then there was a white scout car trundling along. There was a Stuart light tank, and he had a Grant. I'm driving the Grant, and then bring up the rear. He did have a quad, which is like a Canadian World War II kind of truck with these kind of forward sloping things. Kind of an interesting vehicle. So we're trundling along at a magnificent rate of about 8 miles an hour down these roads. And yeah, the cops stop us. This car comes racing past and stops, and I'm like, oh Christ, did you not call the cops and say there was a slow vehicle convoy or something? No, it turned out it just happened that the police in the cars, it was the president and vice president of the state Morris Fanciers Association, and they'd gone past, seen this World War II Morris car, and had done a absolute double take and stopped. Is that a Morris? Yeah, that's a Morris armoured car. Oh my God! So yeah, we ended up continuing on with the convoy, but he let one of the police drive the Morris because it was just such a thrill. Got to see without any hassles, didn't it? But yeah, so but of course this games group often includes our old friend Toxic Gamer, and you know the fun there. Malcolm made a Lorica segmentata. That's the Roman legionary armour made from horizontal strips. And we turn up at his place, he's got this Lorica on a mannequin all sitting there, and he's got the different bits. He's making an Imperial Gallic helmet, Imperial Gallic C, I think. So he's fixing all the eyebrows on, I love Imperial Gallic helmets, but he's putting this in. Toxic Gamer, who is like a Roman fan, every time he plays Ancients, he plays Romans. Has to be early Imperial Romans, but can you make me one of those? And Toxic Gamer kind of had this huge spherical kind of gut that stuck out, and Malcolm still looks at this and well, the thing is, they're made from horizontal lames that form like a tube and kind of slip over each other. They have to be like a tubular fit, so they have to be a relatively tubular shape, so I'm afraid that kind of wouldn't fit you. So, just do me one where all the strips are vertical. We'll think about that. We go on, we're playing RuneQuest. Malcolm is a very good artist, so playing RuneQuest, and suddenly I feel bump, bump, bump on my leg. Malcolm's hand is under there, he's passing a piece of paper. He's drawn a cartoon of Toxic Gamer wearing a rain barrel around his middle, with a pair of straps holding it on, with a bucket on his head, with a little slit cut in it so he can see out a feather duster stuck on top. It's like, yeah, well done. Because he worked for the Border Gas Explosives, extraordinary things. You turn up and you just find, a World War II boys anti-tank rifle sitting there on the table. How can we get the boys? Oh, yeah, I traded that and got the boys. Do you want to go fire it? Yeah, cautiously, yes. So we go out, and it's got a monopod on the front. Now, I hooked this over a stump so that the monopod, and pulled it back so it's completely, the monopod's going to take all the recoil. Apocalypse, absolute apocalypse. You fire this thing and it's like, if you're playing a World War II war game and someone tells you that they're firing a anti-tank rifle from concealment, tell them to smeg off. This thing shot out about a 10-foot long muzzle flame. Every mosquito in 1,000 yards came up out of the grass, turned around and said, "Oh, it looks yummy over there." But yeah, just whack, this thing goes down range and just straight through this bit of armor plate we had set up there. So yeah, it was spectacular, but thank God I'd put it over the monopod. But yeah, I did turn up and find him like walking around with one arm hanging. So what happens is, I just took it out and kind of, set it up like he'd set up a Bren and fired it. So yeah, that wasn't a good idea, was it? Nope. Wacky thing, the guns on the tanks, of course, all actually functioned. Australia has laws against firearms. It doesn't have, didn't have laws against cannon. That comes under a different thing. A firearm is defined as anything you can hold in your hands. If it's larger than that, is a destructive device and comes under explosives and destructive device rules. So again, you have to be a million miles outside and have storage facilities and whatever, but he did in fact. There are actually people who drive tanks out onto ranges, the army ranges, and fire from World War II tanks. So it's like, okay, you got to do this. Kind of great when you're a fab young wargamer. But yeah, so strange, interesting times. You'd turn up there and he would actually have like explosives that they're supposed to get rid of. And I want to go make something bang. Come on, I'll show you how it's done. And you actually get explosive handling lessons from this guy on, okay, here's how you do this, always lead. you know, from the controller, no wires on the controller, we attach the detonators, now we move back to the controller, make sure there's solid mass between you and the point of explosive operation, now we detect, it's so, okay, great. But he was actually as a bomb disposal guy, and he he was in the official bomb disposal films for training, because and I came across these later on in the army days. But yeah, you got this guy up there doing the instruction, and they've got this film of Malcolm in this full bomb suit kneeling down in front of this bomb and whatever, and then he starts backing away, but he's shuffling backwards on his knees, always keeping his face towards the bomb, and this instructor saying, see, he treats that bomb like his opponent. He never turn your back on your opponent. You always keep it under your eye. So, so this is a really good operator. And I happened to know, because, Malcolm had spoken to me that day. He says, no, they've given him this huge bomb suit, and he's knelt down to look at this bomb and just said, oh, bugger it. No, I'm not touching this. This thing's a nightmare. And he went to stand up, and the suit was too heavy. So he said, this thing's going fizzle. I think this is going to go. So he says the nightmare of having to shuffle backwards on his knees, because it was the only way of getting out of there fast enough. And he wasn't going to turn his back on the bomb. The arm was on the front. But it's like, treat it like an opponent. Malcolm had started off in New Zealand. Now, he always posed as being really kind of intellectually superior, and he was a smart guy, but could be a total pain in the ass about it, and one of those people that kind of presumes that other people don't know what they're talking about, which in our group was kind of dangerous, because everyone's kind of bright. But we found someone else who filled us in. He got run out of New Zealand on a rail. Forgive me if I told you this one before, but it's worth telling again. They decide they're going to do a controlled disposal of explosives. They've got quite a bit that his department has gathered, so they get contacted by the army, who said, look, we know you're doing this controlled explosion. We have a exercise on in this little town or in its surrounds, and we want to sort of simulate a nuclear explosive going off as part of the exercise. We're testing out all our NPC equipment and all this sort of thing. Everything's going to be buttoned up, etc. So, all right, could you make a bang that'll be the signal that something's happened, and that kicks off this part of the exercise? And they said, oh, sure, we can. We've got this old quarry. We're going to do this thing, and you'll hear it from where you guys are. Right, good. So Malcolm said they go to this old quarry. There is a caretaker at the road leading up to the quarry. Hi, we're from the department, we're doing this. Oh, yes, he's been told to expect. So they go up and says, yeah, there is this pit which has been sunk, and it's like, ooh, it's about 20, 30 foot deep pit down there. Says, all right, so says, right, let's give them a run for their money. Let's make something a good show. So, all right, so yes, they put these explosives they wanted down there, but there was a whole lot of old kind of magnesium scrap. So let's put it down there, because that'll burn and that'll make kind of like an ash, and it'll make a lot of white smoke. So you'll get a bit of a mushroom cloud out of this. And we'll put some sump oil, so they'll get from vehicles. So you'll get lots of smoke. Yep, there we go. Well, they set all this up, and this is where they made the mistake. They said, all right, well, it's about 2 days till this exercise. We'll just put a tarp over the hole, and this place is guarded. There is a ranger down at the opening of the quarry in a little kiosk looking after the place. So we just went around and says, all right, we'll see you later. Says, oh, okay, you guys are coming back? Says, oh, yeah, we'll be back. And we'll be back for when we set it off on Tuesday. Okay. So the ranger waves and goodbye. But every single other damn department in New Zealand has heard that there's going to be a controlled explosion to get rid of explosives. Now, explosives have a use by. There were many different departments. So what had happened was they have like fisheries and wildlife people who have explosives that are used to set off snow that might turn into avalanches. But they had some of these mortar rounds for that, which are getting past use by. Well, if it's going to be a thing, we'll just add them to this. So they turned up guard at the gate says, "Hi, you guys. Oh, we hear there's a controlled explosion. Oh, yeah. That's being set off on Tuesday, but the pit's over up there." So, oh, good. All right. Fine. So these guys would just go and they just put explosives in the pit. But then the air search and rescue people have out of date flares, and they turn up. "Hi, is there a controlled explosion going on?" Guy at the front gate, sort of another kid's come in, because it's another shift. But he's been told there'll be explosives people coming back. Oh, okay, these must be more of the explosives people. Fine, come on in, explosives people. So more stuff gets put in the pit. And more, and more, and more. And Air Force and Navy. And, so Malcolm Co come back. The original guy is on guard. "How's it going?" "Oh, fine. Everything's fine. We setting this thing off?" Yeah. Here's some ear protection. You may want to come way back with us. But they just essentially don't check in the pit. It's like, well, they know it's fine. It's got a tarp. We'll just remove the tarp. Brief glance down there. Oh, yeah, it's dark and murky down there. But okay, this thing goes off at 9 a.m. So 3, 2, 1. Woo! And he said, yeah. It was like the atomic apocalypse had come. You felt the whole ground pulse, and it was that moment where, oh, yeah, that wasn't what they'd put in there. And you see this column of flame shoots up in the air and says it must have gone hundreds of feet up in the air. It says it was beautiful. It was like this column of flame with tons of all these, because there's flares in it, as well as all the magnesium and sun oil and stuff they put in there, and high explosive, and out of code mortar rounds, and this thing flares out into this fantastic mushroom cloud. Meanwhile, no one had gone and warned the local town. The army had presumed that if these guys were doing a controlled explosion, they would have told the town. But the explosives guys haven't told the town because it wasn't supposed to be that big a bang. And they figured if there's an army exercise, obviously, they must be coordinating. So no one's told the town. So the town just feels this thunderous bang, and people go outside and look up and sort of see this mushroom cloud. And apparently they had people piling into the trucks and heading for the hills. When the official inquiry is done, yes, Malcolm ended up sort of as one of the people to blame for insufficient liaison. They should have always had one of the departmental people on site at all times, and yeah, they were screwed. So they kind of promoted a lot of these people sideways, and they kicked them out of New Zealand as, why don't you go and lend your skills to the Australians? So that's how he ended up over here. So, but yeah, he moved way down out into the wilderness somewhere, turned into a bit of a curmudgeon. It was never the most sociable of guys, but turned into a real kind of curmudgeon, and seems to have kind of just almost died alone and unnoticed, surrounded by 400 tanks, and just wishing everyone would sort of, quit bugging him. So, I guess you get what you ask for. But an interesting gamer, a key gamer in the eastern states of Australia in his time. He ran his own businesses making resin model kits of obscure tanks and so on. He would turn up to conventions and he would have a whole life-size modular dungeon that he'd pieced together that you could go through with traps that would spring and all these sorts of things. Whole suits of actual armor that he'd made so you can dress up as your party. You got a cleric, all right. What's your cleric got? Banded mail. Here's your banded mail. Here's your shield. Here's your mace, and so you could feel what your character's actually got and actually explore. So a very interesting and valuable character. It's a shame he's gone, but I had to do real research to actually find his obituary, and because I was wondering, where's this guy gone? So anyway, cheers Malcolm, you're an interesting guy, decidedly one of a kind. Cheers everyone.